What is crackling, everybody? Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire. That is right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com, as we are here to break down the DFS implications of NFL free agency thus far. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, joined here as always by Brandon Gadula. He is the managing editor for numberFire. Brandon, happy Friday to you. It's been a strange week, to say the least. How you doing today?
I am currently in a losing battle with Microsoft Excel right now, so not great.
There's a pandemic and Excel is rebelling. What else could possibly go wrong?
Maybe this is the start of the robot revolt. Starts with Microsoft Excel.
My Excel's working fine.
Well,
I had like 6 open earlier today, which is way over the normal capacity of my computer. And I know I was playing with fire, but that's, we take risks here on the Heat Check. We live on the edge.
Yeah, it's kind of our motto. No, I had it and then I lost it. No,
our modus operandi, I think it is. I don't know.
That's what that is, man. I had it in my head and then I waited for you to finish and then
is that what you were trying for or no?
MO?
Our MO?
No.
Our MO is living on the edge.
Our tagline.
Yeah, Heat Check. We live on the edge. Yeah. I think that definitely sums us up. What have you been doing to fill the sports void the past 10-ish days?
Working out. Thankfully, got the home gym set up in my new house, so that's been helping. Watching some TV, not a whole lot. Working on some other projects I have that I never have time for. Trying to read, but I like to read. I do read, but I'm not really currently in a book, so I don't like to, say that I'm reading. What about you?
I am trying to get caught up on things that usually give me a lot of stress during baseball season. Like, I get stressed about evergreen NFL content, which we're doing right now, which I've done throughout the week this week. I get stressed about evergreen MLB content. I guess I feel more guilty about not doing it, more so than stressed. We're going to be doing that 2 weeks from now, I believe. I feel guilty about not getting my offensive line rankings out earlier. Those might get out earlier this year. So I know it's like, it's tough to fill this void, and like, it stinks because there are so many like jobs impacted by all this. But I guess from just strictly our perspective, there is this gap to get things done that we usually can't get done. From that perspective, it's like, it's helpful from a stress perspective, but like, it's hard to be happy about that given all the bad things that are happening to everyone else. Like, that sucks.
Yeah, I don't know if I answered the question the right way because I was just talking about like me, but you're talking about doing work. So
yeah, it's hard. Like at 5 o'clock, I'm like, well, what do I do now? Like usually I'd go like set some NBA DFS lineups, lose some money. I can't lose money right now because there's nothing to lose money on. League of Legends, I know, I get it. Go ahead.
No, we'll all make some money. League of Legends.
I'm not going to make money on League of Legends. I guarantee you that. I will lose some money on it.
You can put it on at 1 o'clock today Eastern and enjoy some League.
I was going to say like I could have some alternative, but I have no alternative to provide. So I guess I'm going to watch League of Legends.
Jim's excited about iRacing, which
Sunday.
Is just
it's going to be broadcast on Fox Sports 1 with like actual broadcast crews.
Oh. Yeah, clearly you've never seen a League of Legends broadcast.
No, you're right. You are right. I meant relative to like a lot of other things. League of Legends has actual broadcasters who are probably very, very good at their jobs. And like, that's such a difficult thing to broadcast. Like, kudos to them. But like, they are actually going all in on iRacing. Like, Dale Jr. released his like top 5 rankings on Twitter today. How can you not get excited about that?
If you're excited about like top 5 rankings, then you have a huge world to uncover with esports.
Yeah. And also, There have been a lot of top five rankings out because no one has content to write about. So let's talk some free agency because we actually do have things to discuss there. As mentioned, we did have some evergreen NFL DFS podcast this week. Went through takeaways from perfect lineups from this year and also looked at the anatomy of a bust in NFL DFS, trying to avoid those high ownership guys who don't come through. To get those, just search for the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. Evergreen MLB DFS stuff up coming up 2 weeks from now, I believe. We'll get to that then. But let's talk some free agency. Now, we're going to go through big moves that have gone down thus far here today. We're not going to discuss situations that are still very, very likely to change before the regular season. So we're not going to talk about the Patriots with no Tom Brady because odds are they're not going to go into the year with Jarrett Stidham and Cody Kessler as their lone two quarterbacks. Probably going to change something there. The Chargers, I think, they could go into it with Tyrod Taylor, but the odds they change are pretty high. So we're not going to discuss Austin Eckler. We can get to him once we get towards actual games, but we can talk about Tom Brady to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Obviously, this is kind of the headliner here, Brandon. We're going to start with all the quarterbacks because they're kind of the engines behind NFL DFS, because they influence so many other positions. What was your initial reaction to Tom Brady going to Tampa Bay?
I mean, like my initial reaction from like a non-DFS standpoint was just, I guess this is happening, and this is like our new reality. That was basically my.
Jim was psyched because I grew up a Jets fan. 28-year-old Jim was more like, okay, cool, because for some reason I've lost interest in the Jets. Who can say why? But
yeah, but yeah, I mean, it was just one of those like. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around Tom Brady playing somewhere else, but I mean. I'm excited for it in like a football sense, but I'm also kind of not excited for it from a DFS sense because I love Mike Evans, and I think this is bad news for Mike Evans.
I think it's a combination, I guess, and I think this will be true for when we discuss Teddy Bridgewater too. It's different, but I don't necessarily know if it's like a bad thing, I guess. The big deviation between Tom Brady and Jameis, outside of 30 interceptions, is that Brady doesn't go deep all that often. He was 37th in deep rate last year. That's based on passes that travel at least 16 yards beyond the line of scrimmage. And it seems like Bruce Arians is willing to mold his offense around what Tom Brady wants to do. But I also think that Brady's low deep rate, it's been a consistent thing for him across his career. He's never really been a chuck it and pray type guy. But I think when you have Mohamed Sanu, Julian Edelman, Jacob Hollister, James White as like your not Jacob Hollister, that's a old school Patriot, but like Matt Lacoste, when those are like your top pass catchers, you're not going to throw deep all that often. So I think what we'll see is Tom Brady's deep rate go up from where it was last year, but also the deep rate of the entire team go down from Jameis. But I think the increase in efficiency will be a positive for them. So maybe Mike Evans isn't going to have like 217-yard, 3 touchdown games, but I think that the floor for Evans should get higher, and I would expect the same to be true for Chris Godwin. Maybe just a slight come down on the ceiling for Mike Evans. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that, but I kind of try to take a step back and think, like, we break down the slates every week, and I was just trying to think how I actually feel about this from, like, sure, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, they'll be a little bit safer. They won't have the ceilings, but how frequently are we going to pay top-ish dollar for these two guys if we think the ceiling is somewhat capped because Tom Brady doesn't throw it deep as much? I mean, Jameis Winston led the league in air yards per game last year, according to fantasyadhd.com. I'm pretty sure, jotted this down right, he led the league 3 straight years in air yards per game and has been top 4 in each of his 5 seasons. And I kind of went over Tom Brady's like deep ball rate, his ADOT sort of per game last year. It ebbed and flowed. And he actually had some double-digit depth of target games toward the end of the season. I think he had like 3 of the past 5. So, I mean, I think that Tom Brady can throw it deep, and I think he can throw it deep well. That checks out in the data. It's just more, I don't know if there's going to be 450 air yards to go around in this offense.
Right.
And then I get a little bit concerned that he's going to focus more on Chris Godwin in the slot than Mike Evans. And then I got just a headache with even less certainty, less volume to go around.
One component that should be good for Brady is that I would expect, even if Bruce Arians does change his system to be not as D-gaffy, I would expect them to still be very pass heavy. Tampa Bay last year was third in pass rate on early downs in the first half. So before scripts got in the way, before third down and stuff got in the way, they wanted to throw. I would expect that to still be the case. So like that'll be there. So the overall air yards won't be as high as Jameis's, but like from a volume and a target perspective, they should be good. And like if Chris Godwin and Mike Evans are getting 8 to 10 targets per game, even if like they're not getting huge downfield targets, that's still, you can do a lot with that, even if it's not necessarily like the deepest thing. And like Brady, like I watched a lot of him last year. Like it seemed like he could still go deep when he needed to. It was more so like he didn't have the capabilities to. So I guess I'm probably a little bit more in on them because I think I still see a path to a ceiling, but I also understand your reservations.
I think the biggest issue for me, honestly, is that Mike Evans, I don't know if he's ever had a yard after a catch ever.
Yeah.
He's like an anomaly and just doesn't get any yards after the catch, probably because he's jumping
right
every which way to get the ball.
Yak is inversely proportional to depth or ADOT.
Yeah. So I mean,
yeah.
It's just not necessarily a ringing endorsement to see Mike Evans go from being dominant in the sense of like the 200-yard, 3-touchdown games to kind of got to do something different. And I don't like that because I love Mike Evans. So again, I think this is better for Chris Godwin.
Yeah, I think it's better for him overall, but I'm still interested in Evans because the overall efficiency of the offense should go up. Like I was talking to Kevin Cole of Pro Football Focus on covering the spread, and their numbers have Brady being worth 1 win above Jameis Winston, which is about 2 points to the spread. So if they get an additional 2 points relative to the spread, that does boost them. So again, I understand the reservation. I think that like from a true 100th percentile outcome perspective, it does come down, but the likelihood he reaches, a good ceiling game, I think that's higher.
Yeah, I mean, Mike Evans is definitely known for floor games and ceiling games. Yeah. This will kind of narrow that gap, but again, kind of and it's going to depend too on where these guys have their prices each week. They got too high for me last year, even with like all the air yards and attempts from Jameis. So it's just going to be a little bit of a wait and see as well.
And I think that Tom Brady himself is hyper DFS relevant with these pieces around him. I do like quarterbacks who throw deep in DFS. Again, I would expect it to come up. So unless his salary winds up being like prohibitively high, I could see myself being very in on Tom Brady in DFS early on.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote up the move for Brady, and his efficiency dropped kind of. I mean, it dropped a lot to the point where we don't typically see that. But if we look at passers who are good quarterbacks and dropped from sort of top 12 levels of efficiency to kind of like league average or a little bit below, which is what happened with Brady, there's almost always a rebound. So there's reason to buy in unless you think that Tom Brady's completely done, which I don't think either of us feel that way.
Yeah, I would understand that. I'm not there personally. Let's move to another guy who had a fall off last year. That's Phillip Rivers going to the Indianapolis Colts on a 1-year, $25 million deal. Rivers struggled. I think perception was that Rivers was really bad last year because he threw 20 picks. But a lot of those picks were behind because our defense lost Derwin James and guys been banged up. We got to come from behind. If you look at the actual per dropback efficiency numbers, Rivers was 13th in passing net expected points per dropback, whereas Jacoby Brissett was 20th with the Colts. Rivers was 11th in deep rate. Brissett was 25th. So I know the perception is that this is not a major upgrade for the Colts, and I wouldn't classify it as being a major upgrade, but I do think that it is a push in the right direction for guys like T.Y. Hilton. Allegedly, it's good for Marlon Mack, but he doesn't fit the mold we like for DFS because there's not a lot of pass catching there. So I think it's a nudge up for T.Y. Hilton. What do you see here with Rivers to the Colts?
Yeah, I kind of made the same note, really, where I think that there's a perception, or maybe it's just a joke, but it's why would they downgrade their quarterback? And look, we like Jacoby Brissett just fine, but Phillip Rivers was better. He's shown a really high ceiling he he lives inside the top 10 and expected points each year. He's just kind of always up there. Now, he's one of it's almost like the inverse of Tom Brady for me, where I watch Brady, I'm like, I mean, yeah, he doesn't have a great situation, but he still looks, decent. And then it's Phillip Rivers, where he's got how many great targets to throw to, and he's throwing the ball into the dirt. So
that's the weird thing about him is he always, like, I can't watch him. Like, there are certain players when I use him in DFS, I can't watch them. Like, Jacob deGrom, back before he like truly broke out, I'd use him in DFS, but I could not watch him because he drove me freaking nuts. I can't use Phillip Rivers because the throwing motion is so awkward that it like makes me think that he's hurt all the time, or I don't know, something. So I just can't watch him. But like, so I get where you're coming from there.
Yeah, I mean, like I sold myself on Rivers a lot last year because he had so many good targets. I was like, he's efficient, even though he's not, breaking the efficiency metrics. He's still an above average passer, and you just watch him and you're like, what is he doing? Like,
right.
But I think one thing here is it might help just the pass catchers overall because Jacoby Brissett didn't really target anybody outside of T.Y. Hilton with any real like interest. It was when Hilton was out, it was just kind of share the ball, and that's never anything that we like in DFS.
We will not speak ill of Zach Pascal, DFS legend for one game.
Yeah.
But
I mean, we know that Phillip Rivers can pepper Keenan Allen. I know that T.Y. Hilton and Keenan Allen aren't exactly the same type of player necessarily, but I think this is not that you and I really need more reasons to love T.Y. Hilton because we both do. But I think this is a boost for T.Y. Hilton for sure.
Yeah, Phillip Rivers is team throw it to your good players, which is a great thing. And I think that's good for T.Y. Hilton, who before the injury last year had a 27% target share. He had 44% of the deep targets before his big injury, I should say, because he did miss a game in there as well. But like those are really good numbers tied to Phillip Rivers. Phillip Rivers now gets they were my best offensive line in my rankings entering last year. And I think I haven't looked at stuff for this year yet, but they'll probably be there for next year too, with Anthony Costanzo being back. So great offensive line, which he has not had in probably literally a decade. T.Y. Hilton to throw to. I would assume that they don't have a first round pick anymore because they traded that for DeForest Buckner, but they have a couple high-end second-round picks. I bet they bring in one of those hyper-talented pass catchers from the draft, and this could be a really good offense, which does benefit Marlon Mack. Again, not really the type of guy we use, but I think Rivers will be DFS relevant. I think the T.Y. Hilton definitely gets a boost up. Anything else for you on Rivers to the Colts?
No, I like it. I just really am hoping Phillip Rivers looks like he's refound kind of what he's had in the past.
We shall see.
Because if not, I'll burn a lot of money.
We're going to burn money, and we won't be able to judge it based on watching him, so Godspeed to us. Teddy Bridgewater, back! He is on the Carolina Panthers. Just from a DFS perspective, I'm so happy that Teddy is a starter again. I loved Teddy coming out of the draft. I thought he looked good at times in Minnesota. Like, he seems to be a genuinely just really good person. One of the few guys who is in the Venn diagram of played for the Jets and the Vikings, and I'm from Minnesota, grew up a Jets fan, so he checks that box. So love Teddy. One of my favorite players in the NFL. I'm happy. What do you see from a DFS perspective here?
I mean, big upgrade. I mean, not
over
necessarily.
Kyle Allen, heck yeah.
I'm not going to say anything bad about Cam Newton, but I mean, from Kyle Allen, it's a big upgrade. Bridgewater, really good in our net expected points metric. If you adjust for opponents he faced, I actually have him as top 7 on a per drop back basis. I know that he had a really good situation with the Saints, really good environment overall, but it's definitely promising to see someone ranked that high. Now, the biggest concern for this offense, probably the downfield work, the A dot, 7.2 career average target depth for him, which is pretty low, but it actually was significantly lower with New Orleans than it was with Minnesota. So it might have been more of a scheme thing because Drew Brees had the lowest ADOT of any relevant quarterback last year. So things might open up a little bit, but I mean, it's pretty easy to get excited about Bridgewater in Carolina.
I think if the deep rate stays the same, Teddy would be tough to use himself in DFS because I want my quarterbacks to either chuck it deep like a Jameis type guy, or run, and Teddy doesn't run. So he would be a tough sell, but it'd be really easy to buy into everyone in this offense because he makes this offense more efficient than Kyle Allen. And that efficiency matters more than air yards. And like, that's valuable. Last year, Kyle Allen was 30th in passing at expected points per dropback. He was absolutely hideous on deep balls. So yeah, Curtis Samuel gets targets downfield, but like those targets amounted to nothing. He caught 9 in a game with Cam, but didn't top 70 in any other game. So like, you can't lower Curtis Samuel's ceiling because he didn't have a ceiling last year. Now, because this offense should be more efficient, I think he has a path to a ceiling. So I've seen people be lower on this offense with Teddy because he doesn't throw deep. But I think the overall increase in efficiency and the fact that they may actually catch passes this year, specifically Samuel, I think is an upgrade for him.
Yeah, you need to have catchable targets.
Right.
Targets, deep attempts matter, but if they're not catchable, it doesn't help. I mean, I think the cool thing here is that DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel, they were like always the mid-range plays who we could talk ourselves into, especially more DJ Moore when he's separated. And I feel like you and I were just higher on Moore all season anyway. A lot of people liked Curtis Samuel, but
it was the air yards, yeah.
With the increased efficiency and the prices, I would hope or imagine be somewhat similar because it's not like this is a massive upgrade. That should like boost the floor here, and that makes them easier sells.
So I think that early season salaries are set based on redraft ADP. At least there's pretty high correlation past couple of years. DJ Moore's going in the second round of some early drafts, so I'd expect him to be expensive, but I'd be willing to pay that because I think the floor would be so good. Like, I could see DJ Moore having a Keenan Allen-esque profile in DFS, which is fine. I like that a lot. But I think that Curtis Samuel will be cheaper because he's like an 8th-round pick, 8th or 9th. So I think that Samuel will be a good bargain pretty early on. I'm still okay with DJ Moore as a more expensive guy because he's worth that, but I think that Samuel is the really big winner here.
Yeah, I know we have to factor in target depth here, but just Sports Info Solution has catchable target numbers, and
look, weren't they both like bottom 5 or something?
Who?
DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel in catchable target rate.
I was looking at just the quarterbacks. I can look up the receivers, but Kyle Allen was at 72%, which is like bottom 10 among guys with at least 100 pass attempts. Teddy Bridgewater 79%. He was 3rd behind Drew Brees and Jimmy Garoppolo. Again, I know that target depth has a lot to do with that, but you need your targets to be
right
catchable.
Yeah, with Teddy, I know that like the situation with the Saints was amazing because like they were a top 3 offensive line. They had Michael Thomas. But the situation here is not terrible. It's a downgrade for sure. But they have Russell Okung at left tackle now. Taylor Moton's their right tackle. Matt Paradis is their center. They have good players, I would say above average players, at the 3 most important positions on the offensive line. So they did lose Trey Turner, and like Greg Van Roten and Darrell Williams are free agents. But this is a good situation in good places. And then you add in Christian McCaffrey, DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel. It's not a bad situation. So I would expect Teddy to be solid, maybe not great for DFS himself, but I think he'll support this offense well. Now, Christian McCaffrey, I've seen people giving him like outrageous target projections like, oh, if he had this many targets with Kyle Allen, he'll have even more with Teddy. I don't think people realize he set the freaking record for targets at running back last year and had 23.6% of the team's total. If you give me an over-under of 141.5 targets for Christian McCaffrey, we're pounding that under at the max, baby, because like that's outrageous. You should not project a target increase for Christian McCaffrey just because Teddy Bridgewater does not throw deep. So I just want to say that. I think that McCaffrey gets a bump up because of touchdown expectation, but he's not going to get more targets. That's outrageous. What about you on McCaffrey?
Yeah, I mean, can he get more targets like physically?
No. He had 9 or more in 7 straight games to close out the year.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a wild stat anyway, but
yeah,
I mean, I view this sort of the same with McCaffrey almost, where he was already the number 1 week in, week out, so long as we could find the value to get to him. So I'm not really changing anything here.
All right, so Curtis Samuel gets a major boost. DJ Moore, I say slightly lower ceiling, but I still like him. But overall, really good move. Upgrading from Kyle Allen to Teddy Bridgewater, and we'll see where Cam winds up. The final quarterback move to discuss today is Nick Foles going to the Bears. We don't know who's going to start a quarterback here, so this may not change anything. But I think the reason that I want to talk about it is that Allen Robinson last year was someone who I had a tough time with in DFS because the ceiling of the offense was terrible because Mitchell Trubisky was terrible. He was 33rd in passing at expected points per dropback, but Robinson had 27% of the overall targets, 39% of the deep targets, and 30% of the red zone targets. I would love to use Allen Robinson more, and I think that I can better justify it if Nick Foles is quarterback. Nick Foles is not tremendous by any means, but I view him as an upgrade from Trubisky, and that's kind of the one thing I have working against Robinson. What is your reaction to this one?
Yeah, I wrote this one up on numberFire as well, and I mean, really, Nick Foles hasn't been great necessarily. He's had one really good year, like one or two other decent years, but Trubisky's had one above average year in his 3 years as a starter. So, I mean, Foles' ceiling has shown to be higher. I know that the sample sizes aren't the same, so that's a little bit difficult to compare. But Trubisky, you might think, has a lot of value to the offense as a rusher, but doesn't really actually add a lot of points.
He also didn't run at all last year, except for like down the stretch.
Yeah. I mean, again, he wasn't 100% healthy, and we talked about that. We thought maybe that was an issue, but out of his 3 years, he's had really one relevant year with any rushing. And in terms of the catchable numbers, again, according to Sports Info Solutions, over the past 2 years, Nick Foles is at 82.7% of his targets being catchable. Trubisky's at 74.3%. I think that the on target rate, catchable rate, these numbers should mean more than completion rate. I'm probably going to use them more and more this year because attempts and targets don't matter if they're not even in the realm of possibility of being useful for fantasy. Yeah. So I'm probably going to implement that a little bit more. And honestly, I think my main takeaway is if it is Foles, I'm going to be higher on this offense, not necessarily to the degree where I love everything about them. Yeah. But for someone specifically like Allen Robinson, it helps. Foles did give 25% of his targets to Zach Ertz in 2018, which helps kind of think that maybe he'll feature Allen Robinson if given the chance.
Yeah, and no Taylor Gabriel here, so we could see Anthony Miller spring up to relevancy too. And if Foles is a starter and is an upgrade, that would also benefit David Montgomery, who had plenty of concerns last year, but that would still objectively help him. We're going to dive into some non-quarterback moves here in just 1 second, but first, today's podcast is brought to you by FanDuel Racing. FanDuel is doing its part to continue to bring sports fans excitement by offering users a chance to bet on horse racing. Use your existing FanDuel DFS login credentials to gain access to tutorials, to learn more about the sport, including understanding how the odds work, the various types of bets, and most importantly, how you win your bets. Watch all of the races live across over 300 tracks and fill the void left in your sports fandom today. For more details, visit racing.fanduel.com or download the FanDuel app today. Eligibility restrictions apply. Let's start things off here with DeAndre Hopkins going to the Cardinals. The way we're going to tackle these things here is discuss both his new situation and what he leaves behind. Let's start here with the Cardinals with DeAndre Hopkins in the fold. What is your outlook for them now that Kyler Murray has more than one guy who is not in his age 36 season to throw to?
Yeah, Murray was very polarizing in terms of his stats and what we kind of expected. He actually, I mean, he slung a ton in his opening game, but actually wound up 27th of 34 quarterbacks who qualified in average target depth. He was 22nd in deep attempt rate, was pretty efficient on them, ranked 15th in adjusted yards per attempt. So that's, I mean, if he throws it deep, if they just kind of use Hopkins to lift the lid, and they actually just kind of throw it. It depends on how the defenses play them. But I think the main thing here is if this gets Murray to throw it deep, I'm gonna love this. If he still doesn't throw it deep, I'm gonna be a little bit wary, despite having two really fun wide receivers paired with Kyler Murray, who's also very fun himself.
So when we were talking about, was it Teddy? I think I said that I want my quarterback to either throw it deep or run. Because Kyler Murray runs, I am going to be in on him regardless. I used Kyler Murray a lot last
Oh
year
yeah.
in DFS. And I think that that's why I'm more okay with him not going super deep, I guess, because the other thing here is the Cardinals, when they started things off, they were a very fast team and they were a very pass happy team. That changed down the stretch because I think Cliff Kingsbury realized they weren't that good and tried to put things back in the bottle. So they finished the year fourth in situation neutral pace, that is per Football Outsiders, and 17th in early down first half pass rate. So that's a good situation, but I think there is potential for upside here if Kyler Murray can be more efficient with DeAndre Hopkins in the fold. And I think that's a pretty fair assumption, given that it's year two for him. DeAndre Hopkins is quite good. So I would expect my baseline assumption for this team going in is that Murray gets a boost in efficiency. That leads to increased pace. That leads to increased pass happiness. So I think that Murray gets a big upgrade. But also, I think that it keeps Christian Kirk pretty relevant, despite the fact that Hopkins is probably going to get a lot of targets. Because, Kirk in his healthy games last year had 25% of the total targets and 33% of the deep targets. That's kind of in line with what Will Fuller got when he was healthy alongside DeAndre Hopkins last year. I'm not saying he'll be Will Fuller because Will Fuller is a very talented player, but I think that Kirk is still relevant. He obviously gets a downgrade. Like, that goes without saying. But I think that he remains someone I would be willing to use as the number two option in this offense in DFS, despite the presence of DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah, so maybe I just need to clarify. Like, I love this for Kyler Murray. We used
Yeah.
him a lot. I have no issues with Murray. It's more if he's not gonna throw it deep, if that ends up being something that is actually indicative of how the offense works, which I don't anticipate necessarily, but that is what
It's a
we saw,
possibility.
and that's something that we have to consider as a possibility. I would not want to pay very frequently for DeAndre Hopkins outside of just tournaments, which frankly is how we always play DFS anyway. In cash
Right.
games, we're not going to pay for DeAndre Hopkins regardless. But I think that it can be obviously very good for Hopkins if the play volume's up. But I mean, he played with a very good quarterback to begin with, so I don't view this as a huge shift for Hopkins himself. But
Yeah.
for Murray, I mean, yeah, I love him as a fantasy quarterback because he does run and we have seen him throw it deep, and he's been relatively efficient, especially for a rookie
Yeah.
on those deep attempts. So it's more of like I really hope that they just unleash everything. I really do.
I do too. I think that for Hopkins, your um, wariness is spot on because there's really no way he goes up in this offense because Deshaun Watson is awesome, and leaving that offense is tough. I like Kyler a lot, but like DeAndre Hopkins' target shares have always kind of been outliers, and outliers aren't going to go up. Like we talked about with Christian McCaffrey, an outlier is not going to go up. So he had 30% of the targets last year in games while Fuller was healthy, 30% of the deep targets. Those could come down, in which case he could get downgraded, but I think it helps Murray a lot, and it does help out, or it doesn't cancel out Christian Kirk. Larry Fitzgerald is dust, but like Christian Kirk is still relevant. Let's talk about the Texans side of this because Deshaun Watson loses one of the best wide receivers in football, gets only a second round pick in return. It does make Will Fuller really interesting. I'm questioning though if he can actually is he someone who is the archetype of a player who can command a really high target share. Now last year in the games he played with Hopkins when he was healthy, he had 25% of the targets, 38% of the deep targets. That's really good. I'm just not sure if he can actually go up from there. So I think for Will Fuller, it might be even like a slight downgrade because of decreased expected efficiency. What are you thinking there?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about this throughout the year. We talk about this like from a basketball standpoint, like whatever it is. You take someone as impactful as DeAndre Hopkins off the field. Sure, the volume might be there on an individual basis, but that like the offense is not going to be as good, and that
Right.
matters. You're not gonna have as many plays. I mean, you might have more plays if you're just trailing and chucking it, but that's not really what you
Which
want
they
from an
could.
offense. But yeah, I mean, DeAndre Hopkins commands attention. He increases the efficiency, and I really loved Will Fuller with the volume he had because he was the afterthought behind
Yeah.
DeAndre Hopkins, and that made him so scary. Now he's going to be the guy who has to kind of take attention away from everybody else And as much as I love Will Fuller and he's a freak, I don't know if he's, like you said, I don't know if he's going to become DeAndre Hopkins. It's really not likely. So I think this is a downgrade for Will Fuller, despite the potential increase in volume, which was already pretty high when he was healthy, which if he's ever healthy,
Right. I think it could increase his floor. I think if we're talking about this from a floor ceiling perspective, I could see his floor going up. I don't think his floor will go down because his floor was already, it didn't really exist. But like, I think his floor could come up, but I also think that that's going to just make his range of outcomes smaller. And like, we are okay with a big range of outcomes as long as you're okay hitting the highs or able to hit the highs. And I think that Fuller may not be able to do that. So I think it's downgrade for Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson is still a tremendous football player, so I'm not expecting him to be terrible. But like, you have to downgrade to react to situations. So I think that's where we're at there. Sticking with the Texans, let's talk about the guy they received outside of the second round pick. That's David Johnson. I have dynasty shares of David Johnson, so I was very happy because he's suddenly no longer a total afterthought. But the decreased efficiency of the Texans offense does impact him. What is your outlook first with David Johnson? Then we'll talk about Kenyon Drake on the Cardinals after that.
I mean, I love David Johnson just as a player. Mm-hmm. I think that there's a clear opportunity. They did give Carlos Hyde 15 carries per game. Hyde had 4 games with 20 carries last year. I think the big red flag is that they had a receiving type back last year in Duke Johnson, and he did not really play from the slot at all. David Johnson did. David Johnson ran like a ton of routes from the slot with Arizona. I don't know if this will necessitate a change in the Houston offense. I'm a little bit hesitant to buy into that. So I think that the rushing volume could be there. Now, if you gave David Johnson to the Texans and still had DeAndre Hopkins, I'd be like, you can't stop them all. The offense is going to be through the ceiling, so I love David Johnson, but I think taking Hopkins off this offense is not enough for me to pay top dollar for David Johnson. I probably won't have to, and I think he'll probably be in like the flex conversation because it's like, hey, this guy's getting 15 carries, like 4 targets, and this offense is at least competent with a decent passer. So like that's kind of what I'm seeing with David Johnson.
It's funny you said 15 carries, 4 targets, because that's literally what Kenyon Drake got down the stretch for the Cardinals. But with David Johnson, I agree with your thoughts. I'm going to ask you to name that salary in a second, because why not? It's offseason. Let's have some fun. But I think that one thing that is making people pessimistic about David Johnson is how terrible he looked down the stretch last year. But like, he had multiple injuries he was dealing with, and I don't think we should gloss over that. Now, he didn't look great early on either, but before his initial back injury, which occurred during their game in week 5, his rushing success rate was 42%. That's about the league average. That's not bad. It was 30% after that. And that's where like that way overplayed clip of him against the Buccaneers where he looks like he's out for a Sunday jog, like that came after that. So I still think that from a talent perspective, he has something left in the tank. The Texans have overhauled their offensive line. I think they're actually pretty decent at this point with everyone being healthy. So I think that the expectation here is pretty good. And with DeAndre Hopkins leaving, yes, it downgrades the efficiency of the offense, but they got to throw the ball somewhere. Maybe that leads to Deshaun Watson being a little bit more willing to dump it off to a running back. But I think that I wouldn't project a ton of targets for David Johnson. Like, he's not going to get the 6 or 7 he was getting early on with the Cardinals last year. Any other thoughts on DJ before we move to Kenyon Drake?
Well, you wanted me to name that salary, right?
Oh, shoot. I forgot. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Name that salary for David Johnson on the Texans, assuming a neutral matchup.
Yeah. I mean, so like Carlos Hyde was, I'm not saying that it's exactly the same situation, but Carlos Hyde was like a low $6,000 running back. We paid like $7,000 week after week for like Le'Veon Bell with the Jets.
Yeah. I
think that Le'Veon Bell is in a better like physical condition than David Johnson, but like I'm probably going to pay like $6,700 or $6,800 for David Johnson.
You want to know what number I had in
as
mind?
Like a flex? What?
69. Like that, yeah. We were on the same page there. Like, he is not a top flight back for DFS unless the target share does get boosted up, but he's very relevant and someone in the right situations who we can get excited about. So it's a deviation from where he was. Now let's talk about Kenyon Drake here. After joining the Cardinals last year, averaged 15.4 rushes and 4.4 targets per game. They put the transition tag on him, which means that they value him in some way. So I would expect Kenyon Drake to have a similar role with the Cardinals next year. I would not expect that role to expand because, again, Miami did not use him in a super heavy workload perspective. Alabama did not use him with a super heavy workload. I think 15-4 is kind of the sweet spot for Kenyon Drake. So I would take the Kenyon Drake we had down the stretch last year and just transfer him over to this year with a slight increase in touchdown expectation because of DeAndre Hopkins. What are you thinking about Kenyon Drake here?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't really view this as like a huge uptick for him.
Sure.
It's definitely not a downgrade by any means. Let me clarify. I don't think it's a huge uptick for him in terms of like usage, but the efficiency should be better. The touchdown should be a little bit easier to come by, and I think that he's going to be. I mean, he's a notch above someone like David Johnson for sure. He's going to be like a mid $7,000 player probably to start the year. I think that's going to be fair in most spots, especially if the offense does start to click. Mm-hmm. So I'm not necessarily enamored with Kenyon Drake, even though he tore things up to end last season. But he's going to be someone who's like constantly in the mix for the second or third running back in a FanDuel lineup.
So we had David Johnson between 67 and 69. Name that salary for Kenyon Drake, assuming that they don't make any big additions to the backfield.
Yeah, then in that case, probably like just thinking back to where guys really were last year, probably like 74.
That's the exact number I had in mind. Awesome. We have not lost it. The heat check mojo still living on. Let's move to another running back here. Todd Gurley going to the Atlanta Falcons, announced this morning. The offensive ranks for the Falcons last year, they were 9th overall in offense based on numberFire's metrics. The Rams were 16th. The Rams' passing offense was better because Jared Goff is great. They were 10th in schedule-adjusted passing efficiency. The Falcons were 11th. So I don't think the offense changes that much for Todd Gurley. I think the offensive line is slightly better with Chris Lindstrom being healthy for the Falcons. I would expect their offensive line to be better than what I expected out of the Rams. But I don't think we're going to see like a bell cow type back. So I think Todd Gurley kind of remains the exact same. Am I off in thinking that?
No, I think that's about right. I reacted to this one on numberFire, and I think that there's a lot of perception that like Todd Gurley is terrible now, and that is not the case. I mean, he's still efficient, like on a per carry basis. I mean, he had the same rushing net expected points per carry as Saquon Barkley last year, as Nick Chubb last year. He was 3rd in rushing success rate. I mean, he's been decent, and he played almost as many, like in terms of snap rate, he wasn't that far off from where he had been the past 2 years, despite all of the injury concerns. So it's kind of like status quo for me with Todd Gurley. And I was way higher on Todd Gurley most weeks than you, it feels like. So
well, he's no Wayne Gallman, so that's why. But I think with Gurley, the one thing that could be positive here and potentially make this a slight upgrade is that the Rams didn't throw to running backs very much last year. That could have been due to personnel, but the Falcons have traditionally. Devontae Freeman was, despite being terrible last year, he was DFS relevant at times because of targets. So I think that that's good. And I had the same note about Gurley's success rate. He was 3rd in football last year. Malcolm Brown was at 40.6%, so 6 percentage points lower than Gurley. And Darrell Henderson was 8 percentage points lower. So with guys running behind the same offensive line, Gurley was better, which bodes well for his talent. So I think if anything, it's a slight upgrade for Todd Gurley, but I don't think it's like a huge deviation for him. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
I mean, I played Devontae Freeman in like cashier formats when he was in the low 6,000s. I don't think that Todd Gurley would be priced there.
There were 2 specific times where I used him, and I felt terrible about it, but it paid off, so like it was fine. But yeah it was the Panthers game, and there was one other one, Cardinals game, because of the receiving. But I think that it's helpful for Gurley, if anything. but mostly a lateral move. Let's talk about the Rams here. I have had trouble with this one. I wrote this one up for numberFire yesterday, and like, even after looking at all the data, I still don't know what to think because all the data says Darrell Henderson is not the guy. His numbers last year, like I said, worse than Brown's. His success rate 2 percentage points lower. They very clearly did not trust him because once Malcolm Brown came back from his injury that forced him to miss a couple of games, Henderson's snap rate was not above 10% over the final 6 games. And in that span, he played 0.0% of the offensive snaps 4 separate times, including in week 17, which was a meaningless game. Malcolm Brown played 32% of the snaps there. So in theory, I'd love to use Darrell Henderson because like he was so much fun at Memphis. He was awesome there. And 3rd round pick. He has this explosiveness. Sean McVay talked him up last offseason, but they very clearly did not value him last year. And as of right now, I'm having a hard time talking myself into him. Now, Malcolm Brown is not great for DFS either because he ran a lot more routes. He ran like 3 times as many routes as Henderson last year, but he only had 6 targets the entire season, the same number as Henderson. So from a DFS, for season long, I think you should try to get both. Like, well, not both in the same roster, but like whichever one's cheaper, just take them. For DFS, I can't get jazzed right now about either. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have to yet.
True.
We're going to need a lot of information. We still have the draft coming up. We don't know
they
what
only
the
have
plans
6 picks, though, and it's really hard for me to see them burning one of their 6 picks on a running back.
You can always trade picks for more picks and then pick a running back. I mean,
in theory.
I mean,
allegedly.
I love when people can cite like how many draft picks teams have because I don't know.
I had to look it up for that piece. That's why. That's the only reason.
Well, like I don't know any of that stuff, but
yeah,
I'm always like my first thought is like, yeah, but teams can always just trade back for more picks if they need to. Like,
yeah, that's fair. They did do that last year too. So,
but like they can add another running back. But for right now, let's say it's week 1 and we're like, the reports are it might be Brown, it might be Henderson. Like we don't know. These are the types of situations where you don't play these guys on FanDuel. Like you wait, you play Christian McCaffrey, you play ostensibly Todd Gurley. I would rather play David Johnson than take a stab on either of these two. So
absolutely,
which is not like a hot take, but
no. All right, but like it's the off season. Let's have some fun. Pick one right now. Just do it.
I mean Darrell Henderson because I love Darrell Henderson as a
prospect. I do too. He was awesome for DFS. Like, whew. College DFS, obviously not NFL DFS, but like I think if I had to pick right now, I would pick Brown. Just like if they were playing week 1 tomorrow, I'd use Brown. Because they exhibited such little faith in him. So I don't know. I think that teams' actions matter.
Yeah.
And the actions they took with Darrell Henderson say to me, not it yet. Could be. Well, and I'd love it.
We just talked about Kenyon Drake, so
accurate. You know what? That's a good point to end on. Let's move to Stephon Diggs going to the Buffalo Bills. Buddy, if you were frustrated with Kirk Cousins, good luck. Josh Allen last year, 27th in passing net expected points per dropback. Kirk Cousins was 6th. Now, quarterback situation matters a lot. And when Cole Beasley is your number 2 wide receiver, I should not expect a whole lot out of you. But I think that public perception of Josh Allen is a lot better than what reality was last year. So I am upgrading Josh Allen in my mind. I do not know if I am equal to consensus once I do that, though. So what are your initial reactions to Stephon Diggs going to the Bills?
So you're saying you're higher on Allen, but still not
higher on Allen than I was previously, but I was so far below public previously that upgrading me from where I was doesn't actually make me in line with the public yet.
Yeah, I can see that. For Allen, in the right spots, I can get there in DFS, but I think specifically for Diggs here, like there's an inverse, like Kirk Cousins didn't throw deep, but he threw deep really well. Josh Allen threw deep, but threw deep terribly. So
Josh Allen on deep balls added 0.14 passing net expected points per attempt. That was like 0.3 expected points worse than league average. The guys right behind him in order. Let's do this. In deep ball efficiency, Kyle Allen, David Blau, Dwayne Haskins, Nick Foles, Duck Hodges, Mason Rudolph, and Josh Rosen. Those are the only players who are worse on deep ball efficiency last year than Josh Allen. Now, it'll get better with Stephon Diggs there compared to just John Brown who can go downfield.
Will it, though, if they're not within 10 yards of a guy?
Accurate. But like having more than one person who he can overthrow is beneficial.
Yeah, I mean, this absolutely is an improvement for Josh Allen. I'm with you where I'm not saying that this is going to make him amazing. I think this is also going to hurt Stephon Diggs, which it hurts me because I love Stephon Diggs, and it was always frustrating to see him go out and get 4 targets even with Adam Thielen out. Yeah. That could be the case again. Cousins had a catchable target rate of 79% last year. Allen's was 70.5. They had basically the same volume. That's like a difference of almost 4 catchable targets per game.
Yeah,
which is not negligible whenever the volume isn't necessarily super high. Kirk Cousins again was just really good on deep balls when he did throw it deep. It was just a matter of not throwing it deep. So I don't know what the floor is going to look like for Stephon Diggs, but I don't necessarily think it's super high.
Yeah, John Brown had a really good floor, but again, he was kind of like the only guy in town last year. So last year, John Brown, 26% overall target share, 38% deep rate. Stephon Diggs, before Adam Thielen got hurt, had 23% of the targets and a 39% deep rate. I would expect both these guys to have good target shares, but I don't think either will be at 25%. What is your thought on that? Is that a dumb take?
I think that they would probably max out at one of them might get around 25, sure. Which is weird because that's kind of where there are about 3 or 4 players really who have target shares above that. And it used to be kind of offenses were a little bit more concentrated on one player, but things are getting spread out now. And then it comes into how many touchdown passes is Josh Allen going to throw per week and which of these two guys might get one.
Yeah.
It's a guessing game that is probably going to be a losing proposition if you're chasing it week after week. So I don't know. I mean, the floor could be fine for Diggs if he does really carve out the 25% target share and gets some underneath work that is guaranteed with some deep shots. But I mean, and this is coming from someone who loves Stephon Diggs. I don't see this as an upgrade.
I agree with that assessment. I think it's also a downgrade for John Brown, which stinks because we also like John Brown on this podcast. So they get downgraded. The other frustration I've had with Josh Allen in the past is that they didn't have him throw a lot when they didn't have to. Now, last year, their early down first half pass rate was quite good. They seem to they as a team seem to value analytics, which makes me want to buy in. But when they could put Josh Allen in a bottle, they did. And that was concerning. So Josh Allen definitely gets a boost because situation matters so much for quarterbacks that he definitely gets an increase. The rushing is awesome, but I don't know if I'm going to be as in line with public here still, even when I give him that boost.
What are we going to do if both of these guys are $6,700, $6,800 in a week? Are you going to feel confident?
They probably will be.
That's probably where they'll start. That's where Brown got up to last year. Diggs spiked up to 8,000 at one point, but I mean 68 to 7 or even that's gonna be really hard to pay.
I can see myself paying that if it's in the right spot, but they're not going to be guys. I'm oh yeah, I need to get in there.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're on the same page there. For Kirk Cousins, this is obviously I would say a pretty major downgrade. He doesn't run, which is bad for DFS. His efficiency, he was okay at times for DFS because he was efficient. His expected efficiency goes down a lot when you take Stephon Diggs out of this offense. So I think Kirk Cousins gets a pretty major downgrade, and he's not someone I'd be interested in single quarterback redraft leagues, and probably not going to get there in DFS unless they do something drastic. Because they had the 22nd and 25th overall pick in the draft, and they're going to get a good wide receiver with one of those picks. But also, Stephon Diggs is Stephon Diggs, and rookies are rookies. So you're not going to duplicate what Stephon Diggs did. The one guy who does get an upgrade here is Adam Thielen. Before the injury last year, he had a 26% overall target share and a 52% deep rate. I don't think the 52% deep rate will go up, but I could see the overall target share being very steady week to week, and that's good. We kind of lost sight of him because of the injury, but now he's healthy again, so I think Thielen benefits. I think Cousins gets a pretty major downgrade. Any other thoughts for you on the Viking side of things?
It's another one of these spots where we just have to keep in mind, like, the offensive efficiency, the spacing could just be worse without Diggs. It depends on who they bring in. But like you said, you're not replacing Stephon Diggs with just anybody. Yeah. Even like a top tier rookie is not going to be quite as impactful as Stephon Diggs.
Like they're in like the Justin Jefferson type range, and he's a really good player, and I like him. But like, it's hard to expect that. It's hard to expect Stephon Diggs level production out of a rookie, any rookie.
Yeah, and the attention that he just commands. So.
Absolutely. Let's move on here to the Browns, who added Austin Hooper and Jack Conklin. Someone in the chat asked about Jordan Howard. He's coming up next, so we'll get to that one. But Austin Hooper and Jack Conklin going to the Browns. Just when I thought I was out on Baker Mayfield, they pull me back in. I was never actually out. That didn't actually happen. But Baker, I think, is a major winner of free agency. I don't think this changes things too much for Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry because, like, they're now healthy, whereas they weren't before. Their target shares may go down because they had awesome target shares last year, but, like, the efficiency should go up now that they're healthy and now that they have a better offense around them. So I kind of think that no one gets a downgrade here. I kind of think Baker gets a pretty major upgrade. What are your thoughts on Hooper and Conklin in Cleveland?
Yeah, I don't want to badmouth Baker Mayfield just for the sake of the podcast. I'm not aiming to do that. So I mean, I'm gonna
tread softly.
I'm gonna listen to you here. I mean, I think that there are just reasons to buy like into a bounce back for Cleveland. They were 20th in adjusted pass offense last year. Mayfield had his own concerns. There were just a lot of picks, a lot of sacks that you would think don't continue. It just kind of regress down toward the mean a little bit, and that's going to give this like at least a league average offense. I would say at worst. So I don't think this is going to be like a top 10 offense necessarily, but it doesn't have to be relevant for DFS with these four, in the passing game with Mayfield and the three pass catchers now.
And they still the 10th overall pick in the draft, so I'd expect them to address left tackle there. So that'll help them out as well. Last year, after they traded Kevin Zeitler, Baker's sack rate went up to 7%, and quarterbacks own their sack rate. Dr. Eric Eager, Pro Football Focus, did a great study on that. So that sack rate going up is partially Baker's fault, but it was also 4.9% as a rookie, which means when he was in control another time, we saw him have a lower sack rate. And I would expect that to go back down now that Jack Conklin is there and under the assumption that they address left tackle in the draft, or maybe a Trent Williams trade or something like that too. So I think the sack rate will go down. That benefits everybody. Baker last year targeting Jarvis Landry threw a pick 5.9% of the time. He threw a pick 1.7% of the time throwing to Jarvis as a rookie. So we're going to get regression there. Also, their schedule was hideous last year. So Baker in his rookie year faced like the easiest schedule you could concoct. So we should have expected him to come back to earth. I whiffed on that. I should have bought more into that. But also last year, they had one of the toughest schedules in football. Next year, if you look at the average ranking of the pass defense they rank, which is a bad way to conduct things, I do not recommend that. Don't listen to this next segment, but it is the third easiest pass defense schedule in football. So just putting that out there. So I would expect a lot of things to regress for Baker. I would expect Jack Conklin to steady that sack rate and the assumption of adding a left tackle. I think Austin Hooper will increase the efficiency. Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry being healthy will help a lot. So I am very bullish on Baker Mayfield and this offense as a whole.
I think it's easy to be, especially after what we saw in 2019. So I think it's going to be a bounce back spot, and hopefully we get to see the Baker of the second half of his rookie year again.
That is the hope. I said we're going to do Jordan Howard next, but it actually makes more sense to do Hayden Hurst to the Falcons next. This will be a short one. Hayden Hurst goes to Atlanta from Baltimore. Okay. Like I would expect him to have some sort of role, but he didn't have a role in an offense that uses like 16 tight ends. Like he'd play like 25% of the snaps usually. So I would say that Hooper leaving is a bigger boost to Julio and Ridley than it is making Hurst relevant. Hurst is relevant for DFS now, but I'm not like fumbling over myself to get there and buy as soon as I can. What about you?
Yeah, Hurst is going to be like that. Well, the Falcons are favored by 6.5, and they're at home with an applied team total of 29, and he's like,
See, now you're talking me into it. Don't do that.
now he's $4,800, and he got 3 targets last week. So yeah, that's pretty much where we're going to be with Hurst. But yeah, I think it's a boost for Julio and Ridley. Really small sample for Ridley last year without Hooper and with Julio, but I have it as 2 games. He had 26.5% of the targets, 40% of the air yards. I mean, it's probably not going to stick. He's not going to be favored over Julio necessarily, but I mean, those are really good numbers, and I think it's easy to get pretty excited about Calvin Ridley.
And Calvin Ridley is a guy we used quite a bit last year. Like he didn't always work out. There were a lot of times where it flopped, but like the numbers we saw in him last year were enough for us to buy in. Now you increase the expected target share even more. I think that Calvin Ridley winds up being a pretty big winner in all this because I don't think Hayden Hurst is going to, he'll be on the field, be relevant, but he's probably not going to get Austin Hooper's target share. And Julio's was down last year at times, but I think this is a pretty significant upgrade for Calvin Ridley. And now Todd Gurley's there too. So it'll be fun.
Yeah, it's going to depend on whether Calvin Ridley is like the $6,500 Calvin Ridley or like the $6,000 Calvin Ridley. Just depends on where he's priced. I mean, if he's going to be up at like in the upper 6,000s, I'll probably be a little bit more hesitant with Gurley there to steal some touchdowns.
I think like 7,000 is really appropriate for him.
I think that there's a very clear path for him to be worth that.
Yeah.
But to start the year, I might feel like maybe 65 is more appropriate than like the upper, like 7,000 and up.
I would say if I'm using the word appropriate, the 7,000 range, like low 7,000, like 7,000 exactly.
All right, we can fight. It's fine.
Turn on your location, bro. I know where you are because you're at home, because everyone is, but just turn on your location. All right, so Calvin Ridley upgraded. Julio, and Hayden Hurst, probably someone to lose money on this year. Let's talk about the Dolphins, because it's not just adding Jordan Howard. It's also Jordan Howard leaving Philly, but also the Dolphins, they signed Eric Flowers, whose name I misspelled on the rundown. They signed him to a 3-year deal. He actually improved as the season went along last year with Washington. I think the move to guard was beneficial for him. Ted Karras, who filled in for David Andrews last year in New England, he's going to play center there. They still have 3 first-round picks. So the Dolphins' backfield is one I'm willing to buy into. Jordan Howard himself is not someone I like to use because he's terrible out of the backfield catching passes. So we get this hype piece every year. Oh, Jordan Howard's working on his pass catching abilities. Okay. I'll believe it when I see it. It happens every year. So I am not overly inclined to buy Jordan Howard. That would obviously change if they were to not address this in the draft. I would still expect them to do so. But what are your thoughts on the new look Dolphins here?
I'm a little more, I'm probably a lot more interested from like a season-long standpoint. If I'm going like
agreed.
Receiver, tight end heavy, and it's like, hey, Jordan Howard could get
100%.
14, 15 carries in this offense and just be kind of like a safe weekly plug-in for my RB2 or flex, depending on like the league settings. But I mean, we're still dealing with the Dolphins. Their win total, their over/under on FanDuel Sportsbook is 6.
Over.
You think over?
I don't know. I mean, only looked at like a couple win totals so far. So
yeah, I mean, it's always hard to know what exactly everything's going to look like. But again, what I try to do for this podcast is like step back and think like, let's say it's like week 3. Really, realistically, what am I going to do with these guys? And playing Jordan Howard, the one-dimensional back on the Dolphins, doesn't seem like it's going to be something that I'm doing a lot this year. That could easily change if this offense turns things around for the better with this offensive line. But again, I'm more intrigued by like the potential safe volume for Howard from a season long standpoint than I would be playing him weekly.
One-dimensional backs are more okay when they are in high-powered offenses, and once they draft Tua, they'll be a high-powered offense. So
There you go.
there we go.
There you go.
But in reality, Jordan Howard, not someone I want to use in DFS. Season long, I agree, sure. If they don't address in the draft, which I would expect them to still do. The biggest winner here is Miles Sanders, not because it changes his situation a lot, but it confirms that Jordan Howard's not going to be there. Now, I do not expect Miles Sanders to be a 17 carry, 8 target guy. That's outrageous. But in the games he played without Jordan Howard last year, including a couple games he left due to injury, 14.7 carries and 5.1 targets per game, that's a really good play for DFS. So as long as the salary doesn't get too high, I can see myself going back to Miles Sanders once again. I'm not super scared about that. Like, I'm very okay with that personally. What are your thoughts on Miles Sanders here in Philly?
I want to throw it back to you real quick. Say, name that price, name that salary for Miles Sanders.
So we had Kenyon Drake at 74.
Yeah.
I would say that Miles Sanders is better offensive line, worst quarterback. Edit that part out. I'm just kidding. We don't edit this podcast. We're live on YouTube. I'll say 74. I think that he's very similar to Kenyon Drake.
Yeah, I think he's about there too. He's going to be in the mix for, like, again, maybe it's McCaffrey, and then I got to drop the whole way down to Miles Sanders some weeks. But for for a flex for an RB2, because in this house on this podcast we pay up for running back. So I mean, thinking like realistically, I have a lot of interest in someone like Miles Sanders relative to Jordan Howard.
I would agree with that. And again, I'd expect the Dolphins to do something in the draft, but I think the Dolphins as a team, if we're ignoring Jordan Howard and his archetype for a second, they are becoming – we should expect big gains from them this year, both on defense and on offense, because Byron Jones is awesome. They've made some good signings on defense. The offensive line will be less of a dumpster fire. Like Eric Flowers and Ted Karras are not superstars, but it's hard to get worse. And Ryan Fitzpatrick, Devontae Parker – Preston Williams, hopefully he's healthy. Like, those guys were all relevant before. They're more relevant now with the gains there. So the Dolphins broadly, led by Tua, going to be awesome next year. But Jordan Howard, not necessarily someone we want to use there. Any other thoughts for you from free agency thus far from a DFS perspective?
Just the one. I was looking up catchable target numbers among guys with at least 50 targets. Chris Conley was 4th from the bottom in terms of catchable target numbers. So,
yeah, but it's not going to get better.
I just wanted to make that be known.
Not going to get better with Gardner Minshew.
Yeah,
we didn't talk about that because like he started most of the games last year, so it's not a deviation. But like, I'm really not into that offense at all. I'm sorry.
No, Yeah, Minshew's just not someone who like elevates that offense for fantasy purposes, so it's concerning. But I needed to make that be known.
It's not his fault.
Yeah, it's not his fault.
It's weird though because like you actually picked someone who is actually kind of underrated to be your guy. I picked like Jared Goff and Marcus Mariota. Like, why did you pick the one who actually wound up being good? Jared Goff's good. That's a lie.
Well, it has everything to do with his athletic ability, not his production, and then whatever he does off the field. So like, it's
generally quite good. So yeah,
it's not based on how good he is at football necessarily. He's just a freak athlete and like a good dude.
Do I have to pivot to Teddy now?
Yeah, maybe
pivot back to Teddy. I guess more.
Yeah, I mean he's a starter now, so
Marcus isn't yet. We'll leave that there.
That's going to be fun. It's going to be week 7, the transition, and one of our trends is the Raiders offense with Marcus Mariota.
The Raiders offense with Marcus Mariota, and it's going to be Henry Ruggs, like just the most Raideriest Raider of all time. So yeah, we'll see. It'll be fun. That's all we have for today. We might. I have not talked to you about this, so we might do another one after the draft to talk about some implications for DFS there. I don't know. We got nothing else to talk about, so why not? We will let you know, though, for sure. But make sure you are subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts, as we will have something else coming along the pipe. Again, evergreen MLB content coming up, evergreen NFL content from earlier this week as well. So make sure you check that out by searching for the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. Brandon, if people have questions for you on Twitter about Chris Conley, where can they find you there?
Yeah, that's what I'm most known for. They can find me at Gadula13, GDULA13.
Not Golf Writer of the Year, Chris Conley enthusiast. That is Brandon's true brand. I am at Jim Sonis. You can find my sad tweets about Marcus Mariota there. At Jim Sonis, JIMSANNES. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcasts. Big thank you, as always, to Calvin Theobald, our video producer, for keeping us on the air. Thank you, Cal, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in for today for a slight distraction from whatever is going on in the world. Hopefully things are going well for you and you are staying safe and healthy. And we'll talk to you all again soon. Until then, again, continue to be safe and healthy. We'll talk to you all again soon. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire.